Well, I mean, it's Face of the Franchise time once again.
A little eerie without music intro, I just got to say.
Well, here's the reason why. We had a great interview with one of the best handicappers in college basketball, as well as just gambling in general. For all those of you who are new to listening to Face of the Franchise, my name is Michael Shanuti, the Pharaoh, and that is always my co-host, Joey Dorian, Little Joe Ooh. And what we did is we interviewed Jeff Nadu today, and it was amazing. I think it was a great interview, first interview, and we definitely want to have him on more often. And for me personally, I think he talked a lot about different things that a lot of people don't know about, like how he fell in love with college basketball, hoops in general. We did talk a little bit about his favorite player, Allen Iverson. It left me speechless with what we did with this interview. So
he was a much more introspective guy than I expected, for sure. You kind of expected him to kind of have that Rico explosiveness and obnoxiousness and off the wallness that some people at Barstool claimed he had, but he was a really just straight shot guy, Philly born and raised guy, knows who he is, loves what he loves, and it was a really nice interview, man. I think he went a little bit longer, gave us a little bit more time than he intended, and I was really proud of us on this one, dude.
Honestly, man, and you know what? We're not going to keep you guys much longer. Without further ado, here's our interview with Jeff Nadu.
For our first ever guest on Face of the Franchise, we are beyond honored to have the man you know as the big man on campus. You know him from the Hoops Betting Hour. You know him from, of course, his new podcast, which is the Sit Down, a Mafia History podcast with his co-host, Black Jack Fletcher, former lawyer and former still genius. He is very underrated, underappreciated, never overstated, and always premeditated with the locks that will save your bank account. It is Jeff Nadu. Welcome to the podcast, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. That was quite the intro. Definitely, I know that wasn't off the top, but well done nonetheless.
He's always the intro guy because he's always eccentric with all that stuff. So he's
very good. It actually was quite good. I wouldn't say anything I do is premeditated, though. I don't want if the FBI is listening, I don't want them to think that I premeditate anything. But thank you for that intro.
It actually comes to you. Right.
Very nice. Either way.
Well, yeah, man. No, that you could tell is obviously well rehearsed. I appreciate that. We're quite happy to have you on the show, man, because you are obviously you made your career off the vast basketball knowledge that you have, college basketball in particular. And in my opinion, which I'll get to later, just a man that lays his balls on the table when needs to lay his balls on the table. I'll get to that in a little bit. But before we get into that, kind of what was your first bet, man? And what made you fall in love with gambling? What made you kind of know that made you the vast fortune teller of college basketball that you are today?
Yeah, the first bet I ever made, I couldn't tell you. I mean, it was so long ago that I couldn't even begin to think about it. I started betting when I was very young. I remember when I was very young man, a boy really. My grandpa, who he passed away in 2009. He kind of, my dad's not a sports fan. My dad works a lot. He just was never really a sports guy. He would take me to games just because he knew I liked it. But on the weekends, I would go see my grandpa and my grandma, and they lived in the city. And I remember, and I would stay there from basically Friday night to Sunday. And, that's really where I fell in love with sports. I was watching sports at a very young age. I'm talking 6, 7 years old. And I remember during March, I would go there and stay, and we'd have breakfast in the morning. And I remember we would always, when the tournament came out, we would always get the paper and we'd cut it out and we'd fill it out. And that was really the first love for college basketball I had. And when I really fell in love with basketball was 2001. The Sixers went to the NBA Finals and Temple went to the Elite Eight that year. John Chaney was the coach. They had a guy called Lynn Greer. And I remember that's really where I fell in love. And my love for basketball goes pretty deep as far as, as a kid, I was a big fan of the And One mixtape tour. I remember going to see that. And, Allen Iverson's my hero to this day, always will be my favorite. And I guess as far as basketball is concerned, as far as betting, I don't know. I've always had a pretty good memory, and I like the fact that in basketball, particularly college, there are so many teams, and I feel like I can run and hide and just kind of find teams that I like. And, for many years, and real gamblers will tell you this, you couldn't bet on a lot of these teams. It was only recent where they allowed you to bet on every team. You'd really have to, try to find the lines for, Florida Gulf Coast or Arkansas Pine Bluff. And those are kind of the teams I enjoyed betting on. And there was a website back in the day called Five Dimes, and they used to have every line. And, I just kind of, eventually just fell in love with it. And I started, as I said, I had a good memory, and I'd always retain all this information. And, my journey into sports betting has been a long one. I mean, I've been on Twitter since 2009. I started out just kind of betting in my own personal life, but then I found Twitter, and I started creating a platform on the internet, and the goal was to get paid eventually to do it. And I had a regular job for a lot of years, and now I'm kind of at a point where I can kind of create a living through content and through what I'm doing. So yeah, it's been a long road, but the basketball love has always been there. And I've always said if gambling went away, I could just watch basketball. I truly enjoy basketball. I truly enjoy, down the road, I'd love to get into coaching and try to help young men. Wow. I think one of the sad things about our country now is we don't have a lot of leaders in communities. And I think a basketball coach is very integral to a community. And, if there's something I can do to help, a young man not go a certain way, I'd like to do that. So, yeah, I love basketball, truly.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to just say we're both from the DMV area. So we know Allen Iverson, Georgetown, and then he always talks about how his coaches got him to where he needed to be. And we, the Vicks and everything with Virginia Tech. So we have our love for our Hoyas and Allen Iverson. So
I've always said the greatest basketball coach in the history of the game is John Thompson. I've always said that. I don't want to bore you guys, but I kind of have an interesting story, and I always try to tell this whenever John Thompson comes up. So I heard a story one time, and this is something I had to research, and I had to kind of figure out if it was true or not. But so when John in the 80s was the coach at Georgetown, there was a guy in Washington, and I don't know how much you follow him. I followed him because, I do the podcast about the mafia and organized crime now, but there was a guy in Washington, Rayful Edmond. And if you look Rayful Edmond up, he was, one of the largest drug traffickers in the history of that city and on the East Coast. And he was moving, a ton of weight. I'm talking about $1 million a week. This guy was making a ton of money, and he was kind of the
big weight, man.
Yeah, he was the godfather of drugs, basically, in DMV and in Washington. And he had started to go to the Georgetown games, and he started to kind of befriend some of the players, and they were hanging out with him. And John Thompson got wind of this little stunt. And one day he goes to one of his assistants and says, I don't know what you need to do, but get Rayful Edmond to come see me. I want to speak to him. Yeah. And they said, we're not going to he's not going to come speak to you, John. He said, he's in the streets. And he said, I don't care. Yeah, he said, I don't care. Get him in here now. I want to see him by the end of the day. Yeah. So they go out, and I guess Rayful took it as, wow, John Thompson wants to speak to me. That's awesome. I'm a big, he's a hero of mine. So he goes in to see John, and John invites him into the office, tells him to sit down. And for basically an hour straight, John was the only voice that you heard. And he just ripped into this guy. And, people have talked about Rayful Edmond never went to another game after that.
Wow.
And, really? And it just kind of shows you what the lengths John Thompson will go to coach and to be a positive force in a kid's life. And I've always been really fond of that. And John Chaney did it too at Temple. So, we don't have coaches like that anymore, but college basketball is still great.
Absolutely.
That's well said, man. And I really appreciate you kind of pulling in that story, too, about the rarity we have now in leadership and educators and as a whole, because as somebody that's been coaching for 10 years now and is in special education himself as well, man. It's a rare thing to have. And John Thompson's impact on this community was huge. And the fact that he could even, for lack of a better term that I used earlier, put his balls on the table to one of the biggest drug lords of all time and say, hey, this is how you be a man.
It's really something, you don't see. I mean, he truly cared about. And look, if you know anything about Iverson, I mean, the only reason Allen Iverson became what he became is because John Thompson said, you know what, you just did a year in prison or 2 years in prison. I'm willing to forgive that, and you can come play for me. And the rest is history. So,
yeah,
we don't necessarily see that anymore. And I think in that area, obviously Kevin Durant, and there's a lot of great players from that area. So that's a very rich basketball pedigree area.
Absolutely, and I think it's a tribute to Allen Iverson and those Hoyas teams because this was a big football town for a while, and it's kind of moved to the basketball, as you could say. Quinn Cook, Victor Oladipo is from here. Like it's insane. So
they just had that documentary that came out, Basketball in Water Country, and it was a fantastic documentary made by Kevin, talking about exactly that and kind of the history that came up from people like John Thompson in the DMV area, and especially PG County basketball.
Yeah, I've always said, I mean, I think the best basketball city in this country is Philadelphia, and I could go on for hours about why, but really this area from New York City to DC, I mean, this is basketball country here. So many great players over the years have come from these areas, and it's people like John Chaney and Thompson and Mike Jarvis up at St. John's, and all these different guys that have been around over the years really set the stage. I mean, you remember, arguably the greatest player in the history of basketball, Wilt Chamberlain, is from Philadelphia. I mean, Kevin Durant. Arguably, Kevin Durant is the best player in the world at this point, PG County. So, Baltimore has a great basketball tradition as well with, Muggsy Bogues and all these different guys. So, it's a great area, and I'm kind of proud to be from this area for sure.
Absolutely.
Same here, man.
So I kind of want to shift gears because we did talk about good role models to maybe some guy that a lot of people think could be known as like a one and done guy, John Calipari. So there's been rumors talking about him leaving Kentucky to go to maybe the NBA to pursue that career again. What is your thoughts on John Calipari as not just the Kentucky head coach, but what do you think that transition for him would be like, and where would that leave Kentucky after he leaves?
Yeah, I actually read an interesting article from the Lexington Herald about this, and there's kind of this growing sentiment that around college basketball, is it according to them, a sinking ship? I don't know. I think and if you ask him, he'll tell you that he's focused on what he calls the best job in the country. And, I think it is. It's right up there. I mean, Kentucky's a terrific program, and he's built kind of a machine there over the years. Look, to be frank, he just didn't have a very good team last year. Look, obviously, if you follow news, I mean, Terrence Clark passed away a couple of weeks ago, played at Kentucky.
Right.
Really is such a sad story. You never want to see someone that young die, but that's a school that constantly is going to get talent. They constantly do a great job at bringing talent there. I don't think he goes to the NBA. I guess it would really have to be the right offer and the right team. Look, if the Boston Celtics called them, maybe. I don't know. I guess it's all about. Look, we've had this conversation in Philadelphia for years. Would Jay Wright come coach the Sixers? And people always tell me it's not going to ever happen. And I said, look, if you paid Jay Wright $10 million a year, he would do it. It's a question. Yeah, it's a question of how much do you want to do it. But I don't think John will leave Kentucky. It would obviously have to be the right offer, and we're not mind readers, so we don't know what will happen. But they're always going to be a team that's 20-1, 10-1, and they're always going to get some great athletes. So I wouldn't leave. He's got the world by the balls down at Lexington.
Absolutely. I mean, you could say. I mean, there's only been there's 4 or 5 college teams that could go to any state and recruit who they can recruit. Kentucky's one of them.
Mike, the thing is, real quick, one thing that you have to remember when you're coaching college kids, it is so different from the NBA because you can actually coach, and you have kids that will actually listen, and you have kids that will actually try to be molded. Now, Kentucky, it's not like that necessarily, but you still have the upper hand. In the NBA, and we've seen this in Philadelphia with someone like Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is not going to be told to do anything, right? He's just going to do what he wants to do. And, I think for me, I wouldn't want to coach in the NBA.
No way.
I mean,
no way.
Unless you're like a Greg Popovich or somebody like that, but it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. So I think John's just happy where he is, and I don't think he's going to go to the NBA.
Right. And then on the flip side of that, recently Coach K says he's going to retire after the season. I mean, Duke was a program he built. Like this was, where was Duke before Coach K? Nowhere. And he built this program, and I felt like he has put the stepping stones. But losing somebody like Coach K, where do you see Duke next after Coach K? Like, are they still going to be that powerhouse? Are they still going to be able to be there? Like, we could count on Duke every year because they missed the tournament last year, and that was the first time Kentucky and Duke missed it. So, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they had a tough year. They were another team that just wasn't very talented. And look, you're going to have those years. I've really kind of I'm not going to say I hate Mike Krzyzewski. I'm not the biggest fan of his. I do think over the last, let's say, 10 years, I think he's been pretty overrated, frankly. I know he won in 14, 15, but do I think they take a step back? No, they're not going to go anywhere. I mean, they have such a machine there that just because Mike leaves, that's not going to change much. He'll still, I'm sure, be a consultant. He's kind of set it up where they're going to be just fine. They're going to bring someone in that's basically an assistant to him or someone that's been in the program for a while, a Duke man, as they say. They're going to be just fine. I'm not real worried about them. I do find it just pathetic, frankly, that Mike had the comments that he had last year, just because this is a guy that, if he had R.J. Barrett and Zion Williamson on his team, he'd not have said anything about COVID-19. Zero. It's that simple. And Mike's about Mike. He cares about him, and he'll always try to tell you he cares about the players. He doesn't care about the players.
As long as his image is pretty, he's good to go. Yeah. Mike's a happy guy.
It's all about can we win a title this year? And if we can't, I'm just going to kind of throw the kids under the bus, and I don't really care that much. And we shouldn't have a season and all that kind of nonsense. But no, they're not going to miss much. He's done some great things. Obviously, you mentioned it. You kind of built them into a power, but they're not going to lose much if they lose him. He's definitely faded over the last 5+ years.
Of course, he fakes injuries when they're losing, so it makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. And look, he obviously is going to have, I think, a better team this year. If you know about some of his incoming players, and he's got a kid coming in, Paolo Banchero, a very good guard.
Yep.
So there's a lot, to guard forward. There's a lot to like about him. So I think they'll be better. They just weren't very good last year. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, you talk about Coach K being all about himself. How about that press conference with the lights and every time we touch? Oh my goodness gracious! I thought it was a Teen Choice Awards. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, they were playing. I think they were playing Cascada every time we touch.
Yeah.
Which is a great song. I came up when that was a very popular song, and I did enjoy it. But and we're gonna have to see the gag fest every game he plays, because anytime a player and look, I don't want to bring up Kobe Bryant, but because obviously rest in peace Kobe, but they did it when he retired. Every city he goes to, you got to have this big ceremony, and they're gonna lay the red carpet out for Coach K. So that'll be gag worthy.
I can't wait for the North Carolina when they do that, and I'm gonna laugh because I'm gonna.
No,
you hate this guy. You hate this fucking guy.
They should really not do it and just say, look, we're not doing that. F that. We're not doing that. We hate Duke. But sadly, there's no rivalries allowed anymore in America, so we can't have rivalries. So, I'm sure
we don't want to affect anybody's sensibilities now, Jeff. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to cross any lines. We got to be careful now, make sure everybody's happy, and we don't hurt the rose bed, bud.
Watch when Dak Prescott retires. You think we're going to throw him a party here in Philadelphia? Absolutely not. This is a city that booed Michael Irvin when he, hurt his spine at the vet. So,
that's right.
Yeah, we ain't doing that here.
Only stadium in football to have a jail, sir.
Not anymore. We used to.
Oh, yes. What? How did I?
Yeah, there's no jail in the link, but there was a holding spot in the vet. Yes.
So going back to college basketball for just one moment, and I think you kind of touched on it greatly, of the skill sets it kind of takes to transition from college to the NBA and dealing with the egomania that is the players of the NBA. But there were some kind of Cinderella stories this past March Madness tournament that was maybe a little bit due to COVID, maybe a little bit of some up-and-coming powerhouses that are translating into a right of their own, and things like Alpine Christian and Oral Roberts and maybe more Oregon State. Do you see any of these teams kind of transitioning into a team that we look at as a noteworthy college basketball program in the future?
Yeah, it's so hard to do that. I mean, it's hard to become, what Gonzaga is now, or even what Wichita State's become, or whoever. But
Right.
Oral Roberts is going to take a step back. They're obviously going to lose. I think they lose Max Asmus, as far as I remember.
They did.
Yeah, but as far as just kind of some of the surprises, one of them was UCLA. I mean,
yes,
UCLA was a team that obviously lose on a buzzer beater, but I wrote it when I was at Barstool. I wrote a blog. It was, I don't know, I think it was 9,000 words. According to an editor, it was the longest blog in the history of the company. I wrote a blog basically. I picked every college basketball conference. I picked a winner and a runner-up, and I picked like a surprise team. And if you go back and read that, I made it a point to say that I thought UCLA was going to take a major step forward. Now, I had no reason to believe they'd go to the Final Four, but when you hire a guy like Mick Cronin, who, over the years, Mick is a blue collar guy, doesn't get a ton of respect. I thought Cincinnati was the perfect program for him. He was from that area. He's kind of a rough and tumble guy. If you know anything about Mick's childhood, he grew up in like a rough area. His dad was a coach, and he kind of came up in the streets. And Mick is a tough dude, and I wondered, could he go to UCLA and make those kids buy into defense? Because as a college basketball coach, the toughest thing to get a kid to do is play defense. Kids want to shoot threes and dunk and hot dog and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But if you
get
a kid
good for Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Right.
You want to be Steph Curry or whoever. And look, at the end of the day, you don't become LaMelo Ball or somebody like that because you play good defense. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
So him going out to California and getting those kids to buy in, and I thought that was one of the great coaching jobs this year that I've seen in a long time. I think he went from being a good coach to a great coach, and I think they're a team to really keep an eye on. You look at coming into this year. This is the team that is third in the future market to win the entire thing. They're welcoming literally everyone back. The only one they're not going to get back, I think, is Chris Smith. But they welcome a lot of kids back, Juzang included, Jaquez included, a lot of kids. They get Peyton Watson, a top-level recruit. So, I think they're going to be a team that continues to stay in the talks. And look, historically, they've always been a good basketball team.
Absolutely. And you bring up
pieces and chemistry all together is going to be a beautiful thing to see how it develops. So.
Yeah. You bring up UCLA, and you talked about that, and Joey brought up Oregon State. And we talk about the Pac-12, or Bill Walton likes to call it the Conference of Champions, but not so lately. Did you think this March Madness was the Pac-12 coming back, kind of with the UCLA, Oregon State coming to the forefront, and then maybe we will see Arizona State coming up behind them? Where do you see the Pac-12 and West Coast basketball coming back to go against East Coast?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, USC had a great run as well as Colorado. It was a great year for the Pac-12, and good for them because they haven't really had a signature run like this. A lot of people have soured on this conference as a whole, really in football and basketball. We've seen in football, them always make the Final Four and get boat raced. Whether it was Washington or whoever. So I've always been a big fan of the Pac-12. I love West Coast basketball. I've often said in sports, there's nothing better on a Thursday night in January at 11 p.m. watching a Gonzaga or a Pac-12 game, a West Coast game.
Yes.
I just love it. It's just incredible. So, I think Oregon is a top 15 team coming to the season. They went out and really hit the transfer market hard, bringing in, Devion Harmon and Quincy Guerrero from Syracuse. And, they have a good core coming back with Richardson and Eric Williams and Nafali Dante, who is a 7-footer, didn't barely play last year. They've had some rough injury problems just with him and Bol when he was there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think Oregon is a top 15 team for sure. USC is a top 25 team. And, we've seen teams take step forwards. I mean, Washington had a terrible year, but I think they'll be back eventually. This way they defend, they have to be. Arizona hired Tommy Lloyd, which, might be one of the best hires in a long time in college basketball. I've raved about his ability. The reason Gonzaga is where they are is Mark Few, but a lot of it has to do with Tommy Lloyd as well. Tommy Lloyd was the kid that went out and got Domantas Sabonis and Karnowski and Joe Ayayi and all these European kids that come over there.
Yep.
That was Lloyd that did that. So, there's a lot to look forward to with that conference, and I'm happy to see it because I enjoy the Pac-12.
Absolutely.
Quick fun side note too. I got to tell you, since you mentioned Bull, and just to show my own idiocy here, Jeff, is so back in 2016, I had a bet with a buddy. We made the top 5 players list within the next 5 years. So it's coming up here soon. And Bull was my number 5. Just so you want to laugh at me there for a second. I had high hopes. I had a 2K franchise where I got him shooting threes. He was averaging about 22 a game, and obviously it didn't develop that way. So.
Well, I think the jury's still out on Bull. I mean, obviously he's got terrific bloodlines. He's got great, size. He's a gigantic individual. But it's so tough at that size to have, a long-term success, just because it takes a lot, on your joints and things like that. But we'll see. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 player. But, maybe he'll develop into a good role player.
Back in my college days.
Yeah. Hey, it's not an awful decision. I mean, he was a freak athlete for sure.
Absolutely. So
I appreciate you being a kind guest. Thank you.
That's Joey loves to make these random bets, because we for football bet I had Patrick Mahomes, he had Lamar Jackson, and let's just say he's paid me up handsomely on those bets. But
hey, by the way, this is a pretty interesting point. So I've had some great predictions in football into the NFL. You want to hear 2 of my worst predictions ever?
Absolutely.
Okay. I've actually said this on camera, and if you want, you could probably find it somewhere. I said that Patrick Mahomes would not ever start in the NFL.
Oh my goodness!
All right, Jeff, let's go. We're in the same boat, baby. Let's go.
Both of you in the
listen
same
to
boat.
this one. This was also another good one. I said that. Now, listen. I've also said that I've had a lot of good predictions, but I said that Luke Falk reminded me a lot of Tom Brady.
Jeff, come on, Jeff.
But no, if you go back and look at Luke Falk at Washington State, he did look like he was from a good system, and he had certain tools that reminded me of Brady. But yeah,
you fell in love with the tape. You fell in love with the tape.
But you know what, man? Like, I feel like if you really know football, there's always going to be people you get wrong, And,
absolutely.
That's just part of the game. And Mahomes has obviously had kind of paid me back in a lot with his play. So.
Listen,
I always call it like the sports rehab, right? Where it's like you at that one player you attach onto, you fall in love with, and you just got to go to a couple meetings just to get over it and slowly but surely cure your PTSD that they gave you.
Yeah, that's very true.
So I was rock hard on Patrick Mahomes, and my Patrick Mahomes, and said he was going to be I said he was going to be a great quarterback.
I don't let me tell you something. I don't believe that, because if you actually watched him at Texas Tech, there was no reason to believe that he was going to be a legitimate NFL quarterback. He looked like a system guy on an offense that throws 70 times a game.
100%.
Jeff, I promise you, I will put this on Twitter.
You had
put this on Twitter.
You had a great read then, because I don't think there was a lot of people that thought he would be any good.
I thought
this is his claim to fame, Jeff. This is his boost. This is what's going to take his career off. This is what he's hoping. So we'll see.
But the year after, I said Drew Lock was going to be good too, and you saw where that came from.
There you go. See, we all have our good and bad, man.
Yeah, exactly. So, just real quick to end the college basketball segment, and then we can move on to football. I know you tweeted out. You said you started your research yesterday. You're ready to go. You're a couple months out. What have you seen now? What are 2 bold predictions for this college basketball season that nobody has seen? I know this isn't putting you on the spot, but what are two bold predictions that you have for everyone? Bets, something outlandish like Wichita State winning the whole thing, anything like that. So,
well, I'll give you 2 teams that I think can legitimately win the entire thing, and I mean that. One of which I've already bet 30-1, and funny enough, I actually had them to win the whole thing last year, and they lost in the first round.
Grand Canyon.
No. Texas.
Okay. There. Hell yeah.
Who lost to the Wildcats of Abilene Christian. So Texas, I'm very high on. I think 25-1 is a wild price. I think they're a top 5 team coming into the season, and I'm not really sure why no one's discussing them. Chris Beard I think he made the case as the best coach in the country outside of Mark Few, in my opinion. Getting him to not only leave Texas Tech but go to Texas is pretty incredible. They have such a huge program that I don't think people quite understand how much just the facilities and everything they have just really you want to go play at Texas. But really this team, you look at who's coming back. Jones is coming back. They've got great guard play coming back. They've got some kids that are just leapers out of the gym. And you look at what they've done in the transfer market, not only going out and getting Christian Bishop from Creighton and Devin Askew from Kentucky and Dylan Disu from Vanderbilt, but they got Trey Mitchell, who I got to tell you, at UMass, this guy is a complete baller. I think he could have went out and become a pro this year. I think he was that good. Timmy Allen from Utah. This is a very good basketball team. And look, it's all about cohesion. But the good thing about this year is, if you know anything about Beard, his chemistry, his culture is always top level. He's always going to have a good defensive team. And you have a full offseason this year.
Right.
We don't have to deal with the COVID stuff for the most part. All these kids are going to be in good shape. So, I think they're a team that people really have to start paying attention to because their numbers are going to keep dropping. Another team that I think is really good in the mid-major market that will be a top 25 team. They maybe are a top 20 team, and they can actually go to the Final Four and win the whole thing. Mark Schmidt and St. Bonaventure. I was high on this group last year.
Wow.
Very high on them this year. This is the best team he's had.
Won me a lot of money last year.
Yeah, they're a very good basketball team. This is the best team he's had really in years. He actually, I thought he would leave and go to Boston College, but it would be hard to think that he would just with the team they have coming back. Kyle Lofton is one of the most under-deserving players in the country. He's just a great guard. Osun Asuni, a kid that I know from New Jersey, just a terrific shot blocker, defensive player. They've got a lot of wing possibilities, just really good. They're the favorite in the A-10. And I think they're going to make some big noise come tournament time. So, I'm going to have my eye on them all summer here and as we get into the season and Texas as well. But we've got so much time until the season starts that all sorts of things are going to change.
Absolutely. No, Bonaventure was everybody's pick. I mean, when they played
LSU.
Everybody was like,
they were the hot ticket, yeah.
I said LSU was a bad matchup for them, and they were. The last thing, if you're saying Bonaventure, you want to see. Yeah, and you don't want to see a team that is just faster, more athletic, and just better than you are. That's not what Bonaventure wants to play. Virginia and teams like that they can kind of dictate the pace, keep the pace slow, and defend. LSU is a bad tonic for them.
Yeah, it was a tough situation because everybody was picking. I swear I saw everybody switching between those two teams, and I was just like, this is going to be the toughest matchup at the tournament.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then that brings
before you do, Nadu, I gotta ask before we move on to football. I gotta ask you, man. Obviously, Philly guy. I know you've already talked about this a little bit on Hoops Hour. You talked about this on Twitter nonstop yesterday and the day before. Obviously, with the 76ers, you even remarked you're done with the team, and I won't make you. I won't dredge up any bad blood. We won't do any of that here. I won't make you relive it. But I just gotta ask you the obvious question here. The question mark, the number one draft pick. Ben Simmons, is it, I just don't give a fuck about this team anymore. I don't give a fuck about basketball anymore. I was never good in the first place, which is what you've kind of suggested. Or is it just, I've got the classic yips? What's going on with this man, in your opinion? Is there any saving Ben Simmons?
No, not here. Ben Simmons is gone. He won't be back. You saw virtually the entire team throw him under the bus after the game the other night. Yep. And look, I got to tell you, I don't really feel that bad for Ben Simmons because Ben Simmons has made it a point to really, I think, welcome a lot of the criticism. Ben Simmons, over the 4-ish years that he's been here, he's not gotten better at his game at all. He's, in fact, probably went the opposite way. And when you invest $35 million a year into a player, he shouldn't be sitting on the bench in the last few minutes of a game because he's a liability. I'm sick of hearing in this town that he's a great defender. Look. Okay. Well, again, at the end of the day, in the playoffs, you know what wins? Making shots. And that's been this team's problem, man. They don't have a go-to guy at the end of a game. And, look, I said a few years ago when Kawhi Leonard was out there from San Antonio, trade Ben Simmons. It's the perfect time to do it. They didn't do it then. Then you had the opportunity this past summer, get Ben Simmons involved for James Harden. Didn't do that. Even at the deadline. they had the opportunity, I think, to probably go out and get Kyle Lowry, because at the end of the day, Kyle Lowry is not going to resign in Toronto. And you're basically going to let him walk and get nothing from him, and you could at least get something in the deadline for him. They didn't do that. And it ultimately cost them. And now Ben Simmons' trade value is went down, and you can't necessarily trade him straight up anymore for players. But if I were the Sixers, there's one move I make, and I do whatever I can to do it. It's Damian Lillard. I think if he wants out, I think you can go to Portland and basically say, look, we'll give you Ben Simmons, Tyrese Maxey, Thibault, and a pick. Give us Damian Lillard back. They would do that.
Absolutely. I mean, before like you
I saw you tweet about CJ McCollum as well a little bit.
I was going to say CJ. So so Dame and Embiid gets it done, you think, with a healthy net squad next year, and maybe the Heat get some players?
I think if you add Damian Lillard to this team, I don't know. If you can retain Curry, Danny Green, Harris, obviously Embiid, Milt, and one or two others. I think Lillard and Embiid is probably the best duo in the NBA. I have a hard time picking against it. Now I know
100%.
I
definitely scary as hell.
Yeah, and fully healthy. Look, obviously Brooklyn is but look, the problem with Brooklyn is they're never fully healthy, it seems like. Kyrie's always injured or gallivanting around doing whatever the hell he does. And, James Harden has become a bit of an injury problem the last few months. And, I think it's just hard to have all those guys on one team. And, out of the East, there are teams to be interested in. There are teams that have made a run. But if the Sixers can add Damian Lillard, look, they were already a number one seed without Damian Lillard. So I think if you could add him, or a Bradley Beal or McCollum for that matter, there's a lot to like about all these guys, and they're much better than Ben Simmons.
Joey's a big Wizards fan, so that's why his face went up when he said Bradley Beal, because he doesn't want him to leave, obviously. But
I would at this point. I would respect if he did leave. I think I would respect if he did leave the trap at this point, and we haven't shown him any respect. I think
that's the point, man.
He's done.
They don't show him any respect, so it's I think as a fan, you're like, well, I don't want to see you leave, but this team's obviously not giving you any respect, so go get your bag and win. And Beal's such a great scorer and just a competitor and a tough dude. So I would love to have any of those guys here.
Absolutely.
And it's like the net with the Nets, too, when you talk about that, too. You look at all the big threes playoff history, right, Jeff? You look at Kevin Durant, you look at James Harden, you look at Kyrie Irving. Well, yes, Kyrie and Kevin in their own respects have had some success, obviously, with some titles. It always seems like it's an injury bug that hits them in the playoffs. It always seems like there's something that kind of looms, especially with James Harden and the playoffs that stops them from getting in that post. And I agree. You get Dame, you get Embiid together, it's lights out, it's over. Everybody better say their prayers and might as well pack up until 2023.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something as well. I'll give you a little bit of a little surprise team for next year. People better start paying a little bit of attention to the worst team in the East next year. I'm going to make a case now. They are going to make the playoffs next year.
Ooh.
The Detroit Pistons are going to make the playoffs. And
talk about putting your balls on the table, sir.
They just won the draft lottery. They're going to have the number one selection this year. And you look at this team, okay? You got some. They're one of the youngest teams in the league, really. And you look at what they have. They have Jeremy Grant, they have Plumlee, they have Hayes, they have Sadiq Bey, they've got Isaiah Stewart. Now you're going to get the number one pick and go out and get a Jalen Suggs or a Cade Cunningham or whoever you want. You have Dwayne Casey at the helm. This is a team that actually against the spread was a winning bet last year. They played hard, they played tough. There's going to be a lot of games that are going to become wins next year that weren't wins this year. And I don't think there's any reason to believe they can't get into the high 30s and maybe get into the playoffs. It's going to be a big change in Detroit. I think they're going to become a solid little team that's going to be a tough out.
Bad boys are back. Bad boys are back. You got to love it.
Make a little early bet, a little future bet for Pistons make the playoffs. Jeff, I like it. Give us a little nugget.
There you go.
So one of the things we want to talk about this playoffs, and then we can talk about next playoffs. What team do you see out of these four now that's set? What team has the best chance of winning the title? And then what team next year? You said Detroit making the playoffs, but what team next year do you believe can win it all next year, knowing what you know now? So.
It's hard to think about next year just because there's the NBA off seasons are always wild and
right.
I'm going to be fascinated to see. Look, a team I definitely like is, a team I like this year that didn't pan out, but, I think they've already made some moves that I'm excited about next year is the Boston Celtics. I mean, this is a team that has a superstar in Tatum.
Yep.
They didn't have Jaylen Brown, for the last couple months of the season. Yep. They still have Marcus Smart, who's a tenacious defender. Their big problem was they probably need to start worrying about bigs because they don't have any, and they were getting just destroyed at the rim. Look, people are never going to talk about Al Horford, and look, he had a disaster career in Philadelphia and Oklahoma City, but Boston is where Al Horford belongs. There was a blog I read today about how could Al Horford be the reclamation project that the Celtics need back, and you look at this young team with Robert Williams and probably a draft pick that they're going to get that's going to need his veteran presence. Al Horford is a hell of a defender still at his age. I think he's a guy that can really provide a big spark for them. Give them 14 to 20 points a game, give them a really good defender, give them a guy that wants to be there. They've went through this, Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker. You then get a replacement for Gordon Hayward. They have a top 20 pick. I think this draft is pretty good as far as cultivating talent. And, getting Al Horford back, I think, is going to be really helpful to the veterans that they have and give them a much-needed player on the wing to guard. Look, he did a hell of a job a couple of years ago in Joel Embiid. So, I think they're a team that because the dust is kind of cleared and, I think they're going to take a real step forward next year. But this year, it's all about the Suns. I think they're the best team left. Yep. I don't think they have many flaws. And I have a 40-1 future on them, so I'm very excited about where I'm at with it.
Oh, Suns there you go. Shit.
Suns and 4.
I got in a little late. Son of a bitch.
So, just transitioning from, obviously, we said before the show, we're a football-centric podcast, so we'll be kicking ourselves if we didn't ask you about the Philadelphia Eagles, because obviously you're a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. And one of the things I want to know from you is what is your outlook with Jalen Hurts at the helm and with Devontae Smith now and with all these different pieces, with a new coach, new regime? What do you think is the outlook of the Eagles this year and moving forward with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think he really is what makes them either, a fringe type of playoff team that can maybe win the division or, a 4 or 5 win team. It all comes down to Jalen Hurts. And, do I think he can be it? Yeah, I do. I think he had some really impressive games. He put some really incredible tape out there. And, that was throwing to guys that, probably aren't going to get as many snaps this year. He had an offensive line that was, had to play third stringers at one point. Let's remember, Siamalu was injured last year. Brandon Brooks was out. Lane Johnson was out.
Yep.
Dillard was out. There was a lot of guys out last year for this team. I think at one point, the only lineman they had playing was Jason Kelsey. It was really pretty incredible. You had guys like, Matt Pryor and LaRaven Clark and some of these guys that are just, or not LaRaven Clark. I think he was on the team last year, but just you don't even know anymore because there were so many
guys like us off the street, basically.
Yeah, Nate Herbig and just guys that really shouldn't be starting. And Jalen Hurts played pretty honorably, as you mentioned. They get Devontae Smith, who is exactly the type of guy they need. They actually traded up to get him. Yep. Reagor, another year older, he's not going to be injured, hopefully. Let's knock on wood. And then you have a Travis Fulgham, who I thought really became a good third option for them. Mm-hmm. They had a guy many years ago called Jason Avant. And Jason Avant always used to have on
early
3rd and 6, he would always be open, and you'd throw to him, and he'd catch it. And that's what I need him to be. You also have some speed with Greg Ward and Quez Watkins, and you have Dallas Goedert. I don't know what they're going to do with Zach Ertz. That seems kind of like a bad situation, but Miles Sanders in the backfield. I think there's a lot to think that this offense, if Hurts plays well, can be good. And they have a new coach. They have a new system. We get rid of that god-awful system Doug Peterson ran. And you have a guy in Sirianni who is a young mind that, I remember when he came here, people were knocking him for the way he spoke, and he was all over the place. And I thought back to when the Phillies hired Charlie Manuel many years ago. I remember they used to destroy him in this town. Oh, he's a country bumpkin. He doesn't know anything. He can't even speak correctly. And what did Charlie Manuel do? He went out there and won him a World Series because he was a hell of a coach that related to the players. He knew a ton about baseball. And, I'm not saying that Sirianni's going to win them a title, but I think he could be like a kind of a quarterback whisperer. Maybe he can get something out of Jalen Hurts that no one is able to get out of him. And the team, kind of rides on what he does. As far as defense, I think there's a lot to be excited about. I still think they're going to make another move to get a corner in here.
Have to.
Yeah, whether that's Steven Nelson or whoever. I was really disappointed they didn't do anything in the draft because, I kind of was irritated with the picks they made. I always am irritated with the picks they made, and I like some of them, but I thought they went way too heavy on interior alignment on both offense and defense, and they didn't go enough. Yeah, they didn't go enough into the cornerback. I mean, you have a great shutdown guy in Slay, but the great thing about the NFL is you can just throw to the other side. And if you don't have a good corner on the other side, it's going to be for wear. So, I hope they go out and do something, and maybe they will. If someone gets cut and they'll go out and take them, but they've got to address that. So we'll see how they do there.
I was kind of surprised that they didn't even try, or maybe they did and I didn't hear about it. Try for Patrick Peterson because they were so much flirtation with him and with the Eagles when he was in Arizona trade talks, when he was in his prime and stuff like that. So it was kind of interesting to see him not be mentioned with the Eagles and probably go with the Eagles, but he has ended up in Minnesota. So that's kind of weird to me that it never transpired that way. It was with Patrick Peterson. So
yeah, I think it's really been the receiver position was and has been the Achilles heel for this team really my whole life. Even when they won the Super Bowl and they just had some really good magic that year, but they've never been able to do two things. That's great receiver talent and great corner talent. And look, really since Asante Samuel in 2010, this team has failed with every cornerback they've tried to bring in. And it's a weird thing of like the cornerback is good everywhere else. He comes here and just gets roasted. Like whether it's Nnamdi Asomugha or Ronald Darby or whoever. It's Byron Maxwell. It's really incredible, frankly. But we'll see. I like what they did at the safety position. We'll see if they can kind of find the guy going forward, because I have to tell you, I don't know if Avonte Maddox and Michael Jacquet are the answer at right cornerback.
I don't know.
I don't feel too good about.
Especially in this division with
I was going to say
McLaurin and all these CeeDee Lamb and all these different guys. It's not ideal.
No, I mean you see the talent at wide receiver in the division. I think it might be the best division with talent wise at the wide receiver position outside of the NFC South. Now that with Julio leaving, but I want to also talk about, because you brought it up with the line being so decimated last year. A person who got a lot of criticism, Carson Wentz. I mean, he's been getting criticism from left and right. Now he went to Indianapolis with his new coach. What did you think he was ran out of town too soon? And then because obviously everybody loves to have that new toy with he's shaking his head because he's Carson Wentz no at all. But do you think he's going to do well? He's going to do well in Indianapolis. What's your outlook on Carson Wentz?
Yeah, look,
I want everything.
I want to make this clear. I always like Carson here. Do I think he was run out of town? Probably. I mean, that's what this town does. And I've heard people say that they're doing it to Ben Simmons. But, Carson Wentz, he got a real deal, man. I mean, I thought he played MVP like in 2018. Right. He gets injured. But look, the problem that Carson Wentz has had and, has had for really his whole career is he's not ever healthy, really. And that's, I think, the long-term issue with him. And, I hope he goes and does good things. I think he will. I think he thrived under Frank Reich and will thrive under Frank Reich. I've said on record, I think he'll go there and win a Super Bowl. I honestly believe that. I think he is really talented, and I think he's a guy that, if he can get back to the form that he was. And look, it is not easy to play here. It's one of the toughest places in the country to play and in sports. People don't realize that in this town, the radio stations are notorious because of the fans here. I mean, if you're not playing well, it doesn't matter if it's 2 games into the season. You are going to be booed and you're going to be ripped apart on the radio. And, for a guy like Carson, who, is from Bismarck, North Dakota, he goes from God's country to South Philadelphia, basically. And a lot of people don't realize this, that when you play for the Eagles, the stadium complex, and I don't know if you guys know this, but if you go to Landover, Maryland, where the Redskins play, it's out in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The stadium complex is literally right in the middle of South Philly. It's at the bottom of South Philly, but it borders a residential neighborhood. And if you look out, into the, if you're on the top deck, you look to your right and you're going to see South Philly. It's right there. You'll see the row homes right there. And, the practice facility is dead in the middle of a place called Packer Park, right in the middle of South Philly. And, you're truly right there with the fans, and they're going to be outside of the fence and they're going to make it known. And, Carson was a guy that I just think wasn't meant to play in a place like this. And I think going to a place like Indy is going to be very good for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was that old country boy, and sorry to interject you, but he was that old country boy for sure that kind of came up and showed a whole lot of potential coming from that small school and coming out of South Dakota State and doing his thing. And I have a whole lot of love for him. Got a lot of love for what the Bison's program is doing too. And I think it's my theory with him, it was never a, Carson talent thing. It's kind of what you hit the nail on the head with, or I'm not a big believer in the bounce back with the Colts as much as you are, Jeff, but more so it's what Philly does and it's what DC does, and it's we just run down superstars. It's what we've been doing across the board in all sports for a while now, for almost a decade since I've been a DC sports fan.
Yeah, but the thing is, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's also there's a reason to realize, they don't do it to players that do well. Like, Allen Iverson was never run out of this town, ever.
Sure.
Allen Iverson could have, assaulted someone in the middle of Broad Street and people would have loved him. I mean, but he performed and he always gave 110%. People didn't even care that he didn't go to charity events and to fan events. They didn't care because as long as Allen, whether he was gambling and drinking the night before, we always knew Allen was going to come here and give you 110%. And he was a favorite forever, and no one would run him out of here. No one's going to run Ryan Howard out of here. No one was going to run, Jeremiah Trotter out of here. It's the players that either don't play well, don't play their potential, make excuses. And I have no issue saying that if you come to this town and do not perform, they're going to boo you. It's that simple. And I wouldn't want it any other way. I get on the Sixer fan base. I got on the Sixer fan base when they lost game 1 to Atlanta, that they were down 25 at one point, and they go into halftime and no one boos them. What are you not booing them for? They deserve to be booed.
That was a
right.
So do I think it's running them out? No. Do I think Carson got a little bit of a raw deal? Yeah, but it didn't help that Carson went out and Nick Foles won the Super Bowl. That really hurt Carson Wentz.
That really hurt his legacy.
Yeah, that it did. And it made Nick Foles in 3 or 4 games. This city was so starved to win a Super Bowl that Nick Foles, if you ask me who the greatest quarterback in the history of this town is,
oh my goodness,
it's Nick Foles.
It's Nick Foles, yeah.
Yes, because he won a Super Bowl. Which and listen, you could talk about Randall Cunningham, you could talk about, Ron Jaworski, you could talk about Donovan McNabb, you could talk about all these different guys, but they all didn't do something that Mickey Big Dick Foles did, and he won a Super Bowl.
Holding that trophy. And now you have a statue.
Yeah, and he's a very average quarterback in the grand scheme of things, but he has that one 3-game run where he just was absolutely incredible. I still am blown away he won a Super Bowl. I remember that night like it was, it was yesterday. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, and I'll always remember it. It was awesome.
And that route caught the touchdown pass better than Brady ever could in his whole entire fucking life. Shout out to Big Dick Nick.
You know what crazy point about this game? So that last play, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but so I was in South Philly. I was on the 2500 block of Sartain Street, which is literally in the middle of South Philly. I mean,
You've got a hell of a memory, Jeff.
Yes, and listen. So I was at a friend's house, and there were probably 25 people in that house. I was so sick, I didn't want to watch it, that I walked out. And I said, I'm not watching this. I'm going to sit outside. I'm just going to listen because I can't watch.
No.
I can't be brought to watch this.
We're the same way with our Steelers and Redskins, man. And that's the biggest moment of your team's life.
because we all knew that if they won the game, it was Broad Street, and I was like a block from Broad Street, and it was. And I remember that silence when Brady threw the Hail Mary in the air, and the entire block was watching the game. The silence for that 10 or what is it 5 seconds was fascinating, and the ball just drops. And you just hear
I
this.
feel the anxiety you had at the time just from you telling the story now.
It was really incredible. And I remember, it was funny too. I never thought about this because I think about it now.
Yeah.
I've lost 120 pounds over the last year, right? So
I was going to say, by the way, man, you look fantastic.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I appreciate that. I remember the one thing I remember about that night was thank you. Running to Broad Street, I remember I was so out of shape that I could barely run there. And I thought to myself, I wish that would happen now because I would be at Broad Street so fast if that happened. But yeah, it was incredible.
Man, that is you running down Broad Street was probably a scene, and that's probably what that should be on the poster.
I would have paid tickets to see that, Jeff.
Well, actually, I have a YouTube channel I can send you. I don't use it much anymore, but if you go back, you can see the video. I actually filmed it. I remember it was probably like an 9 minute video, and it was weird because I was running down the street, and I don't know why I'm telling you this, but so Sartain Street crosses into a street called Shunk Street or Porter Street. Right. And Porter leads to Broad if you get on the left. And I remember I'm running up Sartain, and I look to my right and I see a childhood friend, like years. And he goes, "They do." I said, and we just look at each other. He grabs me, we run. It was it was a beautiful
Disney movie right there. Movie right there.
It was beautiful.
That's the best moment of your life, man, probably.
Yeah, I'll have to post that video sometime. That was a great great evening.
Please do, man.
We're gonna post this and tag you. You should post that video right on top of it, and then
that's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. I'll do that.
Hell yeah.
Good man, thank you. Well, listen, we won't take up too much more of your time. I know we kind of went over the allotted time here with good conversation, man. We appreciate you taking all the time you have. We'd be obviously very reminisce. I don't necessarily have a question about it. You've gotten thousands of questions at this point. This is all you ever cover at this point, all you probably ever talk about. And all I want to do is just make a very blanket statement and say, sir, you put your balls on the table. You tried to be a gentleman. You did everything you could to try to make it work through the Men with Otter podcast by just sitting down with him. He was a little spoiled baby brat that would not allow, that was clearly threatened by someone that brings the heat, someone that's very knowledgeable, someone that has a ironclad memory, someone that's clearly made money off gambling and not just their ridiculous jackassness. And sir, for that, I just want to say, you should have gotten a chance to shine. I'm sorry you didn't, and respect the hell out of what you do, man.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I will just say this on the subject. I've kind of said, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that I'm not going to anymore talk negatively about Rico Bosco. I'm just moving on from it. I will say this, though. Don't be surprised if you don't see me back around in a few months. We have some talks that we're in on right now, and it might happen. I think I'm going to get another opportunity, hopefully there. And if I do, I'm going to take it and run. So I appreciate the kind words, and if you follow Barstool, you know what happened, and
right.
We'll see how it goes. I'm sure it'll be interesting at some point again.
You're about to have a sit down.
Awesome to hear, man. Hell yeah.
I bet you're gonna have a sit down with a couple.
We might have to have a sit down. Yeah, I mean, I would be all about having a sit down, and I've always said I'm willing to be a bigger person, and for the sake of the brand and the company. I've always just wanted to earn and do my thing and try to create a platform for myself. And look, I've always said as well, I don't have to like you to do work with you, and I guess I felt kind of by now that we could get to a point where we could both just do our thing, and I just dish out what I'm dished to. So it's
right.
Really simple for me. So I guess the ball will be in his court, and I'm from what I understand, if this all does work itself out, I think Dave has talked about no squeeze out nonsense this time. Let him do his thing, you do yours, and that's that.
Man. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of got a little bit tiring as a stoolie myself with the squeeze out stuff, but
You like to think a man can have common sense and two men can get that are clearly talented, put away their quandaries, shut the shit down, and make good fucking content.
We have all thought that for a while. And look, maybe someday. Well, listen. The last thing I'll say on this whole thing in this show is, I often think about. So I have a friend that's in federal prison, right? And I don't talk to him unless he calls me. Okay, and it's always it's always a random number, and I don't know what it's going to be. And it's always a block number. But sometimes when I speak to him a lot, I think, well, what if I get a block number call and I hear on the other line, hey, it's Rico. And like, if that would ever happen, which it won't. But,
oh, my goodness.
I do often think, like, what if that would happen, where we just were able to do our thing, and that was that. We'll see.
Rico have a moment of maturity, Jeff? Yeah,
we'll see. We'll see. Maybe he does.
And Ben Simmons is going to have a comeback career.
Maybe. That's true. Maybe.
I did have to ask, and I know you said that was the last thing, but I really need to ask you about the Tommy Cheeseballs video with the whole Dickie Do Club. That is now my favorite saying of all time. Right. So I know I know a little bit about Cameo and how Cameo works. Did you tell him to say all that, or did he say that on his own? Like, he kind of like made it up on the spot. Like,
so all the stuff that he said was taken from his appearance on that True Life episode.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen that. And no, it was really just a Saturday morning, and I saw he was on Cameo, and I'm a big Tommy Cheeseballs fan. I honestly wanted to be like him when I was 15 and I saw that show for the first time. No, I sent him it and I said, hey, I'd be really honored if you would say this for me. And like literally within an hour, he sent it back, and it was exactly like I wanted. And I think it has like 800,000 views or something. So yeah, it was it was and you know what? I actually feel really bad about it now because at the time, Tommy was only charging $22 for that. And now he charges $80. And I almost feel like I should send him $80 just because, like, I probably made him elevate his prices. But maybe I got him more cameos. So I don't know. But he did reference it. They actually interviewed him, I think, last week. And they asked him about it. And he was like, he's like, I didn't know much about Nadu and this guy, but we Googled it and we found out about it. So, yeah, I think down the road we might have to link up, him and I. And there's talk that there might be a big sit down with him and me and all these different people. So I'm sure maybe when I meet him, I'll be starstruck. I know that.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I cannot stop watching that video. Him saying Dickie Do and like explaining it, I have not. I swear, I'm trying to find like a guy to get mad at to say that to him.
Well, yeah, if you've seen the show, he actually says it so he's at Bamboo, which is a club. It's actually no longer there.
Oh, Jersey, sure.
Yeah, and he gets into a fight with this big fat guy, and he gets kicked out of the club, and he's standing outside, and he goes, "You're part of the Dickie Do Club. Your stomach hang out more than your Dickie do." And it was an elite. It was elite.
Oh my God, that is elite combat. That is an elite
it really was.
insult.
It really was.
Oh,
I think that's a great note to end it on, man. Except for I want to let you, of course, plug what I listened to the Al Capone episode earlier today to get ready for this interview.
Yes.
It's an awesome podcast. I like how you guys kind of tied it into the 5 Street Point gangs in New York as well, which was awesome. And I didn't even know that history and how they all kind of tied together. But if you just kind of want to take a quick second to plug that podcast, how it came about, and where people can find it.
Yeah, it came across like really interestingly. Like I decided this year I was going to do things that I wanted to kind of do in the podcast game. And I always have enjoyed the mafia and organized crime history and drug gangs and all this different stuff. And I thought, you know what? Let's just do like a biography type of show, try to tell a compelling story about someone each week. And there are so many fascinating characters in the history of this country from an organized crime standpoint, whether it's black gangsters, whether it's Italian mobsters or whoever. I mean, we just try to tell a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and leave it kind of suspenseful and teach you something that you didn't know. And I think a lot of people don't really truly realize how much the mob has affected this country. And really shaped a lot of historical events, whether it was the JFK assassination or Jimmy Hoffa or the Bay of Pigs or Prohibition.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the mafia was created because of Prohibition and the outlaw of liquor in this country, and it really created a criminal element that has really damaged this country for a century really. So yeah, I think there's so many people that still do. I'm actually right after this show, I'm actually interviewing a guy that I think it's gonna be really interesting. He's not a mobster, but he is a guy that spent 20 years in federal prison, and he jailed at some of the toughest jails in this country, and he bumped elbows with a lot of mobsters, and he has some great stories, and that's really what we're going to kind of turn the show into, just finding compelling people to not only talk about but talk to, and try to learn about their life and what they've done. And yeah, if you enjoy mob history, go check it out. It's called The Sit Down. We're about to cross 100,000 listeners, so I'm very happy with
the
11 episodes. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. The chemistry with you and Blackjack too, man, is awesome.
Thank
you. You got to do me a favor and do an episode. This is the corniest thing to say, but on the American government, man, they are their own mafia. They brought in the crack epidemic. I know you've probably seen Snowfall, man, and brought it into LA. So I think that'd be an interesting one too.
Real quick, funny thing. There's a part and I don't want to give away the show, but if you've seen it, there was a part when they have like kind of this standoff where it's Franklin Saint, his father, and the DA. Teddy. Yeah, Teddy, right.
Yeah, Teddy. Yep.
And a friend of mine told me recently about a tweet he saw where somebody tweeted it out live. They were watching the show and they said, it's crazy that in this show, they want us to root for the American government, basically, which
yep.
Which in a way they do. And yeah, people don't understand that story either. And, I really want to say that is a sad thing that they did to Freeway Rick Ross. If you actually know the story of Snowfall, it's actually the story of Freeway Ricky Ross, who's a real person, who I'm actually going to try to get on my show eventually.
Awesome.
What the goal of my show now is I want to sell the show to a bigger company and try to get with them and get really big guests and try to do some really compelling interviews. So, stay tuned and thanks for having me on, fellas. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And just real quick, can you tell our listeners when the new episodes come out for the
the new episodes come out every Wednesday. So make sure you go check it out. We got a show. I don't know when this show will come out, but it comes out every Wednesday. And we have it out for you to listen to. So check it out.
Absolutely. So just to let you know, Jeff, this episode will come out tomorrow. So today is Tuesday. It'll come out on tomorrow, Wednesday, and we'll definitely tag you and the show on there because it's honestly, I listen to it as well. It's a great podcast. I was a big Boardwalk Empire guy and all that stuff. So we loved it. But thank you again, Jeff, for joining us here on Face of the Franchise. It was honestly amazing that you DM'd me real quick when I asked. So we were big fans of yours before Barstool and after Barstool. So thank you for this.
I appreciate you having me, and anytime. Maybe we'll have to do it closer to the season starting. The NFL.
Absolutely, yeah. We definitely would like you on for our futures for sure.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
You on, man. Thanks for helping out the little guy, Jeff. We appreciate it, and it was a great conversation, man.
Thanks for having me. See you later, guys.
No problem. And for everybody else, this is Face of the Franchise. I am Michael Shanuti. That is Little Joe. That is Jeff Nadu. Stay breezy, stay easy. One love.
We out.